Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. The perpetrator in the Loudoun County High School bathroom sexual assault case is found guilty. The case has been at the center of parent protests in recent months, and local students walked out of classrooms to support the victims. A controversial proposal to monitor Americans' bank accounts scrutinized. Banks call it a privacy breach, and Democratic Senator Joe Manchin today called it a messed up proposal. His opposition means it's likely off the table. We've had a record number of illegal immigrants crossing the southern border this year. But how do the residents at the border feel about the latest caravan approaching the U.S.? NTD visits Del Rio, Texas to find out. Stand-up comedian Dave Chappelle claims the backlash continues. Netflix didn't cancel him, but he says others have. And a Boston Celtics player is calling out the Chinese Communist Party for their concentration camps and slave labor. The verdict is out in the Loudoun County High School bathroom assault case. A Virginia judge ruled that the perpetrator, a 15-year-old boy dressed in a skirt in the girls' bathroom, is guilty. The case grabbed national attention amid months of parent protests against a transgender bathroom policy.
Loudoun County Juvenile Court Judge Pamela Brooks ruled Monday that the accused boy is guilty on 2 rape-related charges. The teen was at Stonebridge High School when the assault took place in May. The accused and the victim, who's also 15, were not identified because they are juveniles. The victim testified that she had consented to sexual activities with the boy before the assault, but that she did not consent to what he did in May. The question of whether the boy is transgender or gender fluid did not come up at the hearing, but court documents state he was wearing a skirt in the girls' bathroom. The boy still has to be tried for sexually assaulting another student at a different high school earlier this month. After that, he will be sentenced. The case grabbed national attention after the father of the victim spoke out at a school board meeting in June. The Loudoun County School Board has since faced heavy criticism for denying the assault and for transferring the boy to another school after the first assault and for pursuing a transgender bathroom policy. Despite pushback from the victim's family and other parents, the school board approved the transgender policy. It would allow students to use bathrooms and locker rooms based on the gender they choose to identify with. The family has sued the school board for how it handled the sexual assault. The law firm representing the victim says the family stands stronger than ever in moving forward to ensure that those responsible in the Loudoun County school system are held accountable so that this may never happen again to anyone else's child. Some students in the school district staged a walkout on Tuesday in support of the victims.
A Senate panel is questioning YouTube, TikTok, and Snapchat on what they're doing to help make their platforms safe for kids. Senators say they want to pass new bills that help protect kids online and that parents should not trust these apps with their kids.
The Senate Subcommittee on Consumer Protection put executives from YouTube, TikTok, and Snapchat on the defensive Tuesday. The senators say the tech giants are offering only tweaks and minor changes in their operations to ensure kids' safety. The panel has a warning to parents.
You cannot trust big tech with your kids. Parents of America cannot trust these apps with their children.
The senators want to learn how algorithms and product design can magnify harm to children, foster addiction, and intrude on privacy. The Senate panel expects the tech giants to provide research on their platform's influence on children soon.
Kids as young as 9 have died doing viral challenges on TikTok. And we've seen teen girls lured into inappropriate sexual relationships with predators on Snapchat. Your parents, how can you allow this? How can you allow this?
Executives from the 3 tech firms defend their companies by listing the product features they say help protect children.
People under 16 have their accounts set to private automatically. They can't host live streams, and they can't send direct messages on our platform. And we don't allow anyone to send off-platform videos, images, or links via direct messaging.
We make no effort and have no plans to market to young children. Individuals under the age of 13 are not permitted to create Snapchat accounts, and if we find them, we remove them.
Between April and June of this year, we removed nearly 1.8 million videos for violations of our child safety policies.
The subcommittee chairman asked the companies whether they would support new bills that seek to better protect children on social media, but none of the executives made an explicit commitment. The Snapchat and TikTok executives said they would make internal research available to senators for review, but the YouTube executive did not commit to releasing any findings.
Democrats on Capitol Hill inching closer to reaching a deal on President Biden's social welfare and climate spending plan. There are several sticking points holding up negotiations, such as whether or not to expand Medicare. NTD's Melina Weiskup has more from D.C.
Democrats on Capitol Hill are making tough decisions on which programs to cut and reduce in their spending package. The massive bill started at $3.5 trillion, but the need to negotiate has watered it down to $2 trillion. Here's what's on the chopping block: free community college, paid family leave down from 12 weeks to 4 weeks, the child tax credit reduced to a 1-year extension instead of a permanent fix, and some climate change programs, specifically the $150 billion plan to incentivize utilities companies to move toward clean energy. And Medicare expansion is still up in the air. Senator Bernie Sanders is confident it will be in the final bill.
We have tens of millions of Americans, older Americans, who have no teeth in their mouth, who are unable to digest the food that they're eating, people who cannot hear and communicate with their grandkids because they have no hearing aids.
But with Medicare expected to be insolvent by 2026, Senator Manchin remains skeptical.
I've always said that I believe that government should be your best partner, but it shouldn't be your provider.
And while these negotiation talks are still ongoing, knowing that some of those programs will have to be cut from that massive spending bill, House Democrats are pushing for a separate bill to expand Social Security benefits.
The poverty level is $12,800 currently. That means 5 million Americans are getting less than that in a check for the work that they've done all their lives and paid into a system. Why is that? Because Congress has never adjusted the payment schedule the way it needs to be.
Congress has not enhanced Social Security benefits in 50 years, and the program is expected to be insolvent by 2034, meaning some recipients could see a 20% cut in benefits. But this new bill House Democrats are pushing would avoid a depletion and even increase the amount given to recipients, along with extending dependent benefits to cover students up to 26 years old. And they'd pay for it by taxing millionaires and billionaires. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
A Democrat-led proposal to require banks to report Americans' financial transactions to the IRS might not roll out as planned. That's because Senator Joe Manchin, a key Democrat vote, said today that he's opposed to it.
I had this conversation. I said, Mr. President, I don't know who put this out and how it got screwed up. When they said basically we're going to start looking at $600 transactions, even if it's $10,000, right. Okay, that's only $800, $900 a year. And I said, do you understand how messed up that is? To think that Uncle Sam's going to be watching Trenton and what it does for bankers and this and that. I told him, I said, Mr. President, I don't know what happened. This cannot happen. It's screwed up.
Democrats proposed the idea for the IRS to monitor Americans' bank transactions as a way to close the tax gap, which is estimated at around $1 trillion. The original proposal was for transactions of $600 or more, then later bumped up to $10,000. Senators Ron Wyden and Elizabeth Warren have advocated strongly for the idea, and Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen supports it. But it's been seen strong pushback from Republicans in Congress and from banks as well. A group of nearly 100 financial institutions sent a letter to President Biden citing privacy concerns over the proposed IRS reporting rule and asking the president to abandon it. And Americans are bracing for what could be the largest influx of illegal immigrants as the caravan of Haitians and others from Central and South America gets closer to the U.S. southern border. NTD's Jason Perry is in the border city of Del Rio to ask residents their perspective on the large caravan heading towards America.
NTD spoke with residents at a park in Del Rio, Texas. The city has a population of about 35,000 people. We asked them how they feel about the upcoming caravan of migrants approaching the southern border.
We have so many people coming through. We don't know where they're going, what they're doing, what they want. It just feels unsafe, especially the whole border.
Carlos is a paramedic in Del Rio, and he said they were overwhelmed during the last surge of immigrants at the border.
It feels a bit safer now that they're gone, especially with the state troopers that's staying here in town, so it feels like they're securing the area. But that was 15 grand. Now there's talks of a bigger, possibly bigger caravan that's coming. If we had trouble with that at that time, I just can't imagine what's gonna happen when the bigger one comes in.
Another Del Rio resident sees it differently.
I don't feel it's not scary or nothing. I mean, they're human beings trying to come and make a living also. I mean, we all should have a chance at get better in our lives.
But he says the federal government should have thought of a better plan than letting so many people come all at once.
We've always been taught to help each other, but if people are doing it the wrong way, they're doing it the wrong way, and if people are coming the right way, they're coming the right way. But the way it is now it's gotten worse. But it's something we're already accustomed to, something we're already used to. It should get better. We hope it gets better.
Juan also said that he and his family look out for each other. And if something happens on his side of town, he lets his family on the other side of town know. And they do the same for him. Jason Perry, NTD News, Texas.
An FDA advisory panel has endorsed child-sized doses of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine. The panel today voted unanimously that the vaccine's benefits in preventing infection in the 5 to 11 age group outweigh potential risks.
Out of 18 voting members, 17 voted yes, and we had 1 abstain.
The endorsement moves the U.S. one step closer to vaccinating children aged 5 to 11, but the FDA isn't bound to the panel's vote. The regulator is expected to make its own decision in the coming days. If the FDA gives the go-ahead, the CDC will decide whether to recommend the shots and who should get them. The nation's public health experts have said getting children vaccinated will help to end the pandemic. But a number of physicians and medical experts have raised concerns about vaccinating children. They say since kids are at extremely low risk for severe illness from the CCP virus, giving them a vaccine with unknown long-term side effects is not worth the risk. We'll keep you updated on the FDA's decision. And some of Dave Chappelle's critics want the stand-up comedian's work canceled. And Chappelle says they're getting what they want. He claims distributors have pulled his upcoming documentary. This after his Netflix special generated controversy over its transgender jokes. NTD's Miguel Moreno has that story.
Stand-up comedian Dave Chappelle says the backlash hasn't ended. Shortly after Netflix streamed the comedian's special, The Closer, critics from the LGBT community called on the company to remove it. Netflix has held the line, but in this video posted by Chappelle on Instagram, the comedian says others have flipped on his upcoming documentary.
This film that I made was invited to every film festival in the United States, and some of those invitations I accepted. And when this controversy came out about The Closer, they began disinviting me from these film festivals.
Chappelle went on to say that no film festival or movie company will touch his film, but he thanked Netflix for letting his special stay on their platform. LGBT supporters have said The Closer hurts their cause.
And to have something like Dave Chappelle's special not be noted that it's promoting discrimination and hate conversation is very hurtful to the activism and the cause that we're trying to progress ourselves in the industry.
We're here to support the trans community and to say that yes, there is freedom of speech, but you don't have to be mean when you make jokes.
Yeah.
In his special, Chappelle does critique the LGBT community and its culture, but he also spends a lot of time admiring the characteristics of his transgender friend who committed suicide. Chappelle says he'll make his documentary available in 10 cities. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
NBA player Enes Kanter is making his voice heard on social media. He's calling out the Chinese Communist Party and Nike for using slave labor to make their products.
The Boston Celtics player usually takes shots on the court.
Now he is firing them at the Chinese Communist Party by posting videos on his personal Twitter account.
The Communist Party of China, I'm calling you out right now in front of the whole world. Close down the slave labor camps and free the Uyghur people.
He is referring to China's forced labor camps in the Xinjiang region, where ethnic Uyghurs are used as cheap means of labor. Kanter also calls out Nike in specific. He says Nike is making use of those forced labor camps, while at the same time advocating for Black Lives Matter and other minorities in the U.S.
You do not say a word about the oppression of minorities in China. Who makes your shoes in China? Do you even know? There are so many forced labor factories in China.
Of course, his statements sparked backlash in China. Chinese social media users were outraged and demanded apologies after Kanter advocated for a free Tibet last week. But Kanter says people in power have to speak up.
Your silence and your inaction is complicit.
Neither Russia nor China is expected to appear at two upcoming global summits. That's according to a national security advisor. Here's NTD's Kevin Hogan with more on that and a potential meeting between Biden and Chinese leader Xi Jinping.
The G20 summit is this weekend in Rome. From the White House on Tuesday, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan announced who will and who will not attend.
I would point out that neither China nor Russia will be attending the summit in person at the leader level, largely, it seems, due to COVID-19. The U.S. and Europe will be there, and they'll be there energized and united at both the G20 and COP26, driving the agenda, shaping the agenda as it relates to these significant international issues.
The COP26 is the United Nations Climate Change Conference. It starts Sunday and lasts about 12 days. Typically, China attends climate conferences. That's so Beijing can make sure other countries are following strict climate rules. Meanwhile, China puts out more greenhouse gas emissions than the U.S. and all other developed nations combined. Sullivan said Biden is making arrangements to meet with Communist leader Xi virtually by the end of the year.
President Biden does believe it's important that he have the opportunity to have a face-to-face engagement with Xi Jinping, and if it's not possible in person because of Xi's travel constraints, doing it by virtual meeting is the next best thing. That's what we're intending.
Sullivan says diplomacy at the leader level is important. That's to manage U.S.-China relations during intense competition between the two countries.
In the rare case of a severe adverse reaction to a COVID-19 vaccine, who's liable for the medical expenses? You might have guessed the vaccine manufacturer, but according to a group of victims, that's not the case. NTD hears from the husband of one of them who's on a mission to raise awareness and support for forgotten victims.
Years ago, Ken Ruckers played offensive tackle in the NFL. Now he's trying to tackle the healthcare system and the pharmaceutical industry. It all started after his wife Cheryl suffered life-altering neurological damage after receiving the Moderna COVID vaccine. The couple now runs a website to document cases of vaccine injury and provide resources for victims. Appearing on The Nation Speaks, Rutgers said that despite documenting over 500 written and video testimonies, they've experienced little help from the FDA and CDC.
So basically, you have handed to the CDC, FDA on a silver platter all of the information that they would need to study what's going on and still not interested. Is that right?
Well, we've had a couple of Zoom meetings with some of the administrators at the top of the FDA and have not been able to get any traction or response or help from them. So it's been a surprising barrier to getting these people help.
Although rare, serious injuries from COVID-19 vaccines are real. Rutgers has documented the testimony of hundreds of victims, and tens of thousands of cases have been reported to VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, although they haven't been independently verified. Despite this reality, talking about vaccine injuries has become taboo and can even get you censored online. And as for medical expenses, are victims being covered by vaccine manufacturers or the FDA?
No, and you know, if you take these experimental vaccines, then you're not covered. It's kind of a buyer beware at your own risk. If you get injured, at least right now, And we're trying to get Congress to put a bill together that would at least try to make these people whole financially. Some of them have had to sell their house or take out a mortgage in order to pay for medical expenses. It's just crazy.
A number of victims involved in Rutgers' effort had volunteered in the vaccine trials. They say that what shocks them most is the lack of support and interest from the vaccine manufacturers and federal agencies. It was recently discovered that OSHA, the federal workplace agency directed by the Biden administration to mandate vaccines for private companies, is not enforcing requirements to collect information on vaccine injuries. The agency states on its website that this is because they don't want to have the appearance of discouraging vaccination, nor to disincentivize employers' vaccination efforts. When asked for his take on this, Rutgers said it appears the federal agency is putting its head in the sand.
What's the motive? I don't know. That's a good question.
Rutgers says the victims in his group will continue their efforts to be heard, helped, and studied to prevent others from suffering the same reactions. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
And Alabama's governor signed an executive order prohibiting state agencies from enforcing federal vaccine mandates. Agencies are not allowed to penalize any business or individual for not complying with vaccine mandates. The order is effective immediately. The governor called the mandates an outrageous overreach. And coming up, states in the Northeast are past this season's first nor'easter storm with no reported casualties. And a panel of former U.S. Air Force officers is going public, sharing details about what they believe were UFO sightings. One Air Force photographer says he captured a UFO firing at a missile back in the 1960s. That and more on NTD News. States in the Northeast are past the worst part of this season's first nor'easter storm. It impacted areas from Washington, D.C. all the way to Boston. NTD's Arian Pazdar has an update from New York City.
The outcome of this storm was much less severe than that of other storms we saw this summer. The governors of both New York and New Jersey put a number of safety measures in place and declared a state of emergency. Flights out of New York City had to be postponed. Thousands of people were without power, and the Lincoln Tunnel from New Jersey into Manhattan was flooded. But bigger problems were avoided, partly due to preparations.
We had teams out dropping sandbags around key areas, particularly in Queens. We had 4,500 catch basins cleaned by DEP. Sanitation's been out there.
Transit preparations included extra crews on the Long Island Railroad and Metro North. They were deployed to strategic areas to protect signals, service tracks, and equipment. Tow trucks have been deployed to bus routes that are prone to flooding. Buses were moved to higher elevations at depots. Emergency generators were deployed to Staten Island Railway, and crews were prepared to remove any fallen trees. Wind in the tri-state area is expected to calm down up around 2 a.m. Wednesday, but gusts up to 50 miles an hour are still possible across Long Island. And the storm should subside around 8 a.m., but it might still be windy at that time. Now 5 inches of rain is expected in central Long Island and about 2.5 inches here in New York City. Arian Pastar, NTD News, New York.
And a panel of former U.S. Air Force officers is opening up about what they claim was alien interference. They say it happened during nuclear testing amid the Cold War. In one case, an Air Force chief claimed to have captured a UFO firing beams at a missile. Let's take a look.
A former U.S. Air Force photographer, Robert Jacobs, is recounting what he dubs a UFO sighting. He believes it interfered with American nuclear tests in the 1960s.
Is real, and has happened, and has been happening. I was part of a U.S. Air Force cover-up for 17 years.
He gave the testimony at a press conference last week titled Nuclear Weapons and the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon. It was held at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. On September 14, 1964, Jacobs led a team at Vandenberg Air Force Base, California, tasked with making high-resolution films of missile launches.
Back in those days, 1963, 64, many of the missiles blew up on the pad. And the engineers at Boeing and Douglas and other outfits were building these missiles needed to know what was happening.
He claims that in one video, a saucer-shaped craft flew across the Pacific Ocean in about 8,000 miles per hour. It then passed over the warhead, circled it, and fired 4 beams of light at it. According to Jacobs, his superior, Major Florence J. Mansman, later warned him to never say that again. Jacobs also recalled 2 CIA members being present at their meeting. 17 years later, he even received threats and ominous phone calls after disclosing the story. A panel of former U.S. Air Force officers also joined the press conference, led by retired U.S. Air Force Captain Robert Salas. They reported on similar incidents where aliens allegedly tampered with nuclear missile tests during the Cold War. The officers are now calling on Congress to investigate and hold public hearings into reports that UFOs have disabled nuclear weapons. In June, the U.S. Department of Defense released a preliminary assessment on unidentified aerial phenomena. The unclassified report published more than 140 encounters with UFOs, but failed to conclude whether the phenomena came from extraterrestrial beings.
Secure, the true solution for your digital privacy and security. Secure is a private and secure messaging and email solution hosted in Switzerland, using military-grade encryption and Swiss privacy laws, giving you true privacy. Secure is 100% private and does not collect or sell any of your personal data. Secure's Helix technology connects you securely to our Swiss servers without the need of a VPN, guaranteeing privacy and security for all your communications. Secure Messenger doesn't require your phone number or any personal data that hackers target. Chat by Invites allows you to chat privately and securely with anyone outside of your secure network without the need for others to download Secure. Secure Send offers you a private and secure way to email anyone outside of Secure. You won't find this level of privacy or security on any other email or instant messaging application. Visit secure.com. Regain and protect your privacy today.
You worked hard for your money. You invest in stability for your retirement and your family's future, to build and leave them with something greater. The next unprecedented financial crisis, political misstep, or unstable government can depreciate it all away. It was called the gold standard for a reason, the financial preservation of tomorrow. Diversify your assets against inflation, market volatility, and the unknown with real money. Hedge your wealth with the purest form of money, physical gold and silver. Because any currency printed on paper can be manipulated. What's backing up your IRA? Do what you need to do right now to be prepared with the Reagan Gold Group. Visit now, rggusakit.com, or call us at 866-912-1384. Receive up to $2,500 in free silver coins and a free safe with your new precious metals IRA. Call now.
Signatures to recall a California district attorney were submitted on Friday. One of the organizers tells us more details behind the recall effort. NTD's David Lamb reports.
A petition was launched on change.org in January calling for the resignation of San Francisco District Attorney Chesa Boudin.
This was as a result of the unfortunate killing with a vehicle on the night before that, which was New Year's Eve.
Supporters of the recall say that the district attorney does not prosecute crime effectively.
San Franciscans, we had enough of Chesa Boudin as the DA not prosecuting anyone, and that was 1 year, almost 1 year to the day of him being elected and sworn in.
There was another major recall effort this year calling for the removal of California's Governor Gavin Newsom. But Greenberg said the governor had many followers and garnered enough votes to stay in office.
Now, Chesa Boudin, on the other hand, is nowhere near, doesn't have that kind of love, that kind of popularity, that kind of support. It's actually the opposite. There's very few people that are staunch supporters of Chesa.
Greenberg says their polls have indicated people in favor of the recall. On Boudin's website, it says, across California, Republicans and their allies are increasingly turning to unwanted, unwarranted, and wasteful recalls, attempting expensive end runs around the democratic process after they lose elections.
This is very lazy what he's doing by trying to use what Gavin Newsom tactics were to say it was a Republican recall, right? And with Newsom, it became a slogan to say reject the Republican recall. Now, in this case, though, San Francisco is overwhelmingly Democrat. The number of registered Democrats here is in the 300 and something thousand.
Over 83,000 signatures were submitted on Friday, which is 32,000 more than needed. Greenberg says through a random analysis of the petitions, signatures overwhelmingly came from registered Democrats. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
40 San Francisco police officers are on leave because they were not vaccinated by the city's deadline. NTD's Eileen Ang hears more from the president of the Police Association.
The city of San Francisco put 40 police officers on leave because they did not get the COVID-19 vaccine. The Department of Public Health issued a health order requiring all city employees to be vaccinated by October 13th. According to Tony Montoya, president of the San Francisco Police Officers Association, there are 41 unvaccinated officers on paid administrative leave.
Right now, the department is going through kind of an administrative hearing right now to make a determination of whether or not those members will be put on unpaid leave status after 30 days.
Another 40 are on disability or family and medical leave, and they have yet to report on their vaccination status. Montoya said the department had to restructure during the last month to compensate those on paid leave.
DHR kind of bungled the situation from the onset, where they gave very strict timelines on when things would do, when they would respond to a particular member. My members followed those guidelines, whether it was submitting an application, requesting an exemption. And the city has just thrown their own rules to the wind. And it's just really made my members distrustful. It completely lacks transparency. And the members are like, what rules am I supposed to follow? Because it's really unclear what the rules are at this stage.
They are requesting the city to rethink their position and present other options other than vaccination.
That's a personal choice. But for the department to just have that kind of hard line, it really doesn't show collaboration between the union and the city. They've just taken this one-size-fits-all approach. And, it'll be up to individual members whether or not they want to seek any type of injunctive relief through the legal system.
Montoya said the department is already short 400 officers, and this mandate is adding to their deficit. Some of the police on leave are eligible for retirement. Some are considering employment elsewhere. As of October 5th, San Francisco has 2,117 sworn police officers. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
The extreme drought has created unfavorable conditions for salmon living on the border between California and Oregon. A Native American tribe that depends on both the salmon and the river in which they live is fighting to save their way of life.
The Hoopa Valley Reservation near California's northern border is home to about 3,200 people who make up the Hoopa tribe. The tribe's lifestyle is centered around the Trinity and Klamath rivers and the salmon that live in them.
If our river dried up, we would die. We would, because we live off the river. Everything we do is around the river. We get our water from the river, to drink. All the streams that flow into the river. That's how we live.
The Hoopa tribe catches and smokes the salmon to preserve them. Families then share the fish among each other.
You have enough to give away. Give some away. And, Ernie takes care of all the family.
To the tribe, the salmon are an indicator for the environment's health. However, California's long drought has caused rivers to become too warm for the salmon to survive. Salmon hatched at the Klamath River hatchery are transported to the Trinity River hatchery and later the Pacific Ocean.
I think that the threat to our fishery with regards to any possible extinction and total destruction of our fishery is definitely real.
Between 1908 and 1962, 4 hydroelectric dams were installed in the Trinity and Klamath Rivers. For around 100 years, the dams have inhibited salmon from reaching the Pacific Ocean to continue their life cycle.
It's something that we continue to fight against every day, every year after year here.
Last year, on November 17th, California and Oregon's governors agreed to join efforts in removing 4 dams in the Klamath River within the next 3 years. The project will be the largest dam removal and river restoration efforts in U.S. history.
There are parts of the West that are still wild. About 80,000 wild Mustangs still roam the western part of the United States. A recently released film highlights the beauty of these animals, their connection with America's past, and the challenges facing their survival. NTD's Jason Blair brings us more.
There are more than 80,000 wild horses roaming federal lands in the U.S. The horses have a strong connection to American history.
You know, these are living symbols of our collective past. You know, the wild horse is an incredible animal. I mean, you could make the case that it should be, you know, the symbol of America instead of even the bald eagle.
Director Steve Latham and cinematographer Brian Pratt talked about the messages and production insights with the new feature documentary, The Mustangs, America's Wild Horses. Latham and his team wanted to bring people into a world they might not know about and raise awareness about how the horses might not survive unless better action is taken. The horses face overpopulation and depletion of natural resources.
But it's complicated, and that's what we wanted to show in the film, is that there's no silver bullet. There's no easy answer on this, but that shouldn't prevent us from doing the hard work to manage them and to protect them for the future.
Making a film about wild animals was also challenging at times. Some days the crew had to drive around for hours before spotting some of the horses. Also, they had to be careful when filming them.
We had to sometimes, be very gentle and stay away from them because, they're beautiful animals, but they can be spooked very easily.
The film features Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist David Phillips and songs by Bruce Springsteen, Emilio Harris, and Willie Nelson. It's currently available in select theaters and virtual cinema. Jason Blair, NTD News, California.
Coming up, another blast in China, the 4th one reported in less than a week. This time, it's a chemical plant in the north. And one French economist says a green transition could potentially devastate the economy of European countries. Find out more in just a moment here on NTD News. In China, a chemical plant explosion in the early morning with no trace of life in the aftermath of the blast. That's the 4th massive explosion in China in 1 week. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has the story.
Another blast reported in China, this time at a chemical plant in the northern part of the country. According to official information, the explosion happened around 6 a.m. Tuesday morning. Its cause and casualties remain unknown.
There's an explosion. Look, the doors and windows are all broken. Look, this is a passing by truck. Look at the glass. It's smashed. Don't know what happened to the driver.
Several surrounding buildings were torn apart in the explosion, and roads in the area have been temporarily closed. According to official data, the chemical plant mainly produces resin raw materials and plastic additives. It's operated by a company called Dingding Chemical Technology. The blast follows a number of other accidental explosions in the country in recent days. A gas explosion struck northern city Dali on Sunday, killing 2, while a different chemical plant blew up 2 days before that, killing 4. And 1 day before that, another blast in Shenyang destroyed nearly an entire street, leaving 5 dead and nearly 50 injured. Due to the communist regime's tight grip on information flowing in and out of China, NTD cannot independently verify these casualties. A concerning number of people were infected with bird flu in China this year. Experts say the current strain appears to have become more infectious to people. This year alone, China reported 21 bird flu cases to the World Health Organization. It reported 5 cases last year. This year's H5N6 variant infected many people, some of whom became critically ill, and 6 have died. Earlier this year, the WHO said there are no confirmed cases of human-to-human transmission, but they are still calling for an urgent investigation into the risks. Days after the WHO statement, an old lady was hospitalized with H5N6 in condition. That's according to an official statement from Hong Kong. China's CDC did not comment, but it did publish a study on its official website, saying the increasing genetic diversity of H5N6 poses a serious threat to human health, warning the cross-species transmission may cause a pandemic.
The Paris Agreement and Europe's green transition will be on the table for discussion at the G20 summit. While the representatives of some European countries are supportive of the energy initiatives, economists have mixed reactions. NTD's David Vives spoke to an economist who says this is a cancel economy agenda that may harm European nations to the benefit of China.
Can all G20 countries be climate neutral by 2050? The European Parliament said last week it will push an accelerated climate action agreement at the upcoming United Nations Climate Change Conference, also known as COP26, which is kicking off at the end of the month. One of the objectives is to cut CO2 emissions by at least 55% by 2030. But the transition will come at a price. The European Court of Auditors estimates that EU country will have to bear the cost of over €1 trillion over the next 9 years. Economist Philippe Erlin published a study earlier in October called Cancel Economy: Why the Energy Transition is an Economic Disaster. He examined the costs of making the green transition and says the outcome might come at too high a price.
The objective of lowering CO2 emissions by 55% implies lowering GDP growth by 2 to 3%. This means gas prices will increase. The subsidies on electric cars will be a really huge cost, and then there are subsidies for wind and solar plants. 2 to 3% is actually really huge.
According to Herlin, the subsidies for the green transition will weigh heavily on taxpayers who might suffer from inflation. Moreover, other measures pushed by the European Parliament might shake up the automotive industry, such as a transition to 100% electric cars by 2035. According to Erlin, this will be highly beneficial to China.
China never succeeded at selling cars in Europe. They never had the technology to challenge the European brands. Now China owns 80% of the rare steels that are necessary to build electric cars. China will manage the electric technology, so they will likely be able to flood the European market with Chinese car brands, while the car industry in Europe is devastated.
These measures are unfair, considering that Europe is only responsible for around 7% in carbon emission worldwide, compared to China's 28%. That's according to a 2019 report. Additionally, under the Paris Agreement, China isn't obligated to reduce its carbon emissions until after 2030 because it's classified as a developing nation. COP26 will start in Glasgow on October 31st. David Vives, NTD News.
Next week, the UN Climate Summit will take place in Glasgow. More than 20,000 people, including 120 world leaders, are expected to attend. There's likely to be travel disruption in the city with planned road closures and strikes from rail workers, as well as the city's garbage collectors as they demand higher pay. In what's seen as a move to manage expectations, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said he's very worried about the success of the summit. NTD's Jane Werrell has this report.
Thousands of people, including leaders from around the world, will soon descend on Glasgow for the UN Climate Summit, with 10,000 police deployed each day. Reactions from people living in the city are mixed.
No, it's quite a good idea, I would think. Yeah, puts us on the world map, doesn't it? Glasgow.
Why are they coming here? Why is the Japanese sending an empty aeroplane to check whether they fly to Glasgow or Edinburgh? What's the best one? It's a complete waste of money. I just don't agree with it.
I think it's really, really weird actually, like thinking that they are coming here. Like I can't even process it, but I think it's amazing that they are coming here and they'll get to see our culture and everything.
I appreciate there'll be some
minor disruption for the city. I think that's a small price to pay for what I hope will be a meaningful conference.
But will it be a meaningful conference? Boris Johnson didn't seem so hopeful, perhaps managing people's expectations, as he answered questions on Monday from school children.
It's going to be very, very tough, this summit, and I'm very worried because it might go wrong, and we might not get the agreements that we need, and it's touch and go. It's very, very difficult, but I think it can be done.
The PM says there'll be a lot of peer pressure at the summit for leaders to make pledges to cut carbon emissions.
Now, we don't know if net zero policies are actually going to be effective, but during the conference, leaders are likely to commit to pricey, big government approaches to cut their emissions. Jane Worrell, NTD News, London.
Families in France are doing all they can to cut their expenses, but the spiraling costs of electricity is squeezing some household budgets to the point of going broke. Olivia Chan reports.
Jacques Cardio, like many in France, is doing all he could to cope with the spiraling cost of electricity. His family is now facing monthly power bills nearly 3 times higher than before the global health crisis, according to a social worker who helps him with his paperwork. The father of 5 has already cut his grocery bill, refuels his car less, and turns the heating off when his children are at school. But the electricity bill is squeezing his household budget to the point of going broke.
Je ne sais plus comment il faut faire face à cette situation parce que on ne peut plus vivre en fait.
All our earnings have to be spent on electricity, the utilities, the rent, the daily costs of living, fuel. We have all that at the same time. That would be hard, not just a bit, but too hard.
Du coup, bon, voilà, ce serait un peu compliqué, et même pas un peu trop compliqué.
This is his wife, Helene.
On peut réduire où pour trouver? On peut réduire au niveau de la nourriture.
What can we cut down? We can cut down on food. We can cut down a bit, deprive ourselves a bit on it. But with energy, we can't do that. The bills come in every day. We don't know what to do. We need energy to live. We need lights. We need all that.
On a besoin de l'énergie pour pouvoir vivre. On a besoin de la lumière. On a besoin de tout.
Wholesale energy prices in France have surged, partly due to low gas stocks and a jump in post-lockdown demand. The French government last Thursday announced that low-income households would receive €100 to help mitigate rising costs, after extending an energy grant to more households. But a social worker at the firm that helps the Cardios says the government grant only covers a fraction of the costs. According to a survey from the country's national energy mediator, 1 in 4 French people said they are struggling this year to pay their gas or electricity bills, up from less than a fifth in 2020. The cardio social worker said the family's situation was exacerbated by factors such as poor insulation at home and spending more time indoors due to lockdowns, remote working, and job losses.
Coming up, French lawmakers have passed a law that would set a minimum delivery charge for book deliveries. That's to protect neighborhood bookshops from e-commerce giants like Amazon. And the world's first stamp will go under the hammer at Sotheby's London in December. It could fetch over $8 million. That and more after the break.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Thanks to your support, you've helped make MyPillow become one of the fastest growing companies in America. Over the last 12 years, you've helped MyPillow create thousands of jobs right here in the USA.
When I got MyPillow, I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
That's why I invented MyPillow. My patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs and helps keep your neck supported and aligned. I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled MyPillow, and to thank you for your support, I'm gonna pass the savings directly on to you. Go to MyPillow.com right now to get deep discounts on all MyPillow products. For example, you can get my premium MyPillows, regularly $69.98, now just $29.98, the lowest price ever.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit MyPillow.com.
France, neighborhood bookshops are held with special affection, but Amazon's virtually free book delivery service is threatening them. Now, the French Parliament has passed a law that would set a minimum price floor for book deliveries. The move is the latest by the state to shield national culture against big tech firms. NTD's Eddie Aitken has that report.
France prides itself in its small independent bookstores. This bookshop owner says tourists are amazed when they encounter her store in central Paris.
We're in a touristic quarter of Paris and we see Americans come into the bookstore and they tell us, we have not seen a bookstore since we didn't even know that an independent bookstore could still exist.
Her store has survived the rise of Amazon, thanks to a decades-old French law that prohibits price discounting on new books. But she says the e-commerce giant's ability to undercut on shipping still skews the market against stores like hers. Now, a new French law wants to change that. It would set a minimum delivery charge for book deliveries. One co-sponsor in the French Senate says she came up with it when she observed what happened during last year's lockdown. The government reimbursed the postage fees for bookstores when they were forced to shut.
In fact, a lot of bookstores are not the biggest ones were able to earn 60 to 70% of their earnings through deliveries. It showed what a break on business the postage costs are for them.
Amazon, with its virtually free delivery charge, had lobbied hard against the legislation. The company says the law would punish those in rural areas who cannot easily visit a bookstore.
The price of books should be the same everywhere. If there are offers online, they also have to take into account the shipping costs. So I think it's normal to have to pay a little more if we want to have books delivered.
The law that is supported by the French president still needs to be enacted. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
The world's first ever stamp, dating back to 1840, will go up for auction in a few weeks' time in London. The unused and pristine penny black is part of a document that's expected to sell for up to $8.25 million. NTD's Neil Woodrow has the details.
The penny black was the world's first stamp, and this one is from the very first sheet of them ever printed. It's part of a paper known as the Wallace Document, which came from the scrapbook of leading British postal reformer MP Robert Wallace. There are believed to be only 2 other examples of perfect ungummed penny blacks from the first printing. Both are in the collection of the British Postal Museum. Philatelist and businessman Alan Hollyoake is the current owner of the Wallace Document. As one of the world's leading stamp collectors, he's seen many rare items in his time, but for him, this is a world icon.
So it's a stamp that came from the very first sheet of stamps that were printed, and the reason we know that is that Robert Wallace, who was the main instigator of the introduction of uniform postage and cheap postage, he was presented with it by the Chancellor of the Exchequer and stuck it in his scrapbook.
Hollyoake bought the Wallace Document 10 years ago for less than £50,000. At the time, rumours circulated that the stamp was one of the first penny blacks ever printed. But it took 3 years of painstaking research to prove that was true and get official authentication. That certification has raised its value significantly. Earlier this year, Sotheby's auctioned this British Guiana 1-cent magenta for just over £6 million. Hollyoake believes his stamp is worth even more.
I would be disappointed if it doesn't make far more than that, because unlike the 1-cent Guianan, it is a stamp.
Also included in the Wallace Document is a proof of the Mulready stationery, essentially an official printed envelope. The penny black and the Wallace Document will go up for auction at Sotheby's on the 7th of December. Neil Woodrow, NTD News.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.
Before you go, here's something you should know. Don't forget you can catch all of NTD's programs on television. NTD Business premieres live Mondays through Fridays at 5 p.m. We broadcast to many of your favorite platforms, Apple TV and Roku, for example. We're also rapidly growing on cable, satellite, and over-the-air all across the United States. Just go to ntd.com/TV, type in your zip code, and find all the ways you can watch NTD.